school bus vanished on a 1986 field trip 38 years later. A drought drained the lake, and everyone saw it. The lake was almost gone. What used to be deep blue water was now a giant bowl of dry, cracked mud. Long lines split the ground like spider webs. The summer heat had taken the last of it. The two boys, Mason and Eli, stood near the edge with a drone controller in hand. "This is so creepy," Eli said, watching the live feed on his phone. The drone flew over the dry lake bed, spinning slowly as it looked down at the strange shapes left behind. Old tree stumps, half-sunk tires. A broken rowboat. Then Mason stopped talking. He stared at the screen, eyes wide. "Dude, what is that?" Eli leaned in. They zoomed in. It was a yellow roof. Not flat, not round. It had curves. Rust, dust, a broken light. It looked like... "No way," Eli whispered. "That's a bus." They hovered the drone lower. Windows. Faded black lines along the side. The front corner read 107. Mason gasped. "That's the one. That's the bus from the story." Eli's hand shook. "The one that vanished in the 80s? Mason nodded. "Yeah, the field trip. The one that never came back." The screen flickered from the heat, but the image was clear. There, buried in dried mud, was the missing school bus. After 38 years, the field trip was no longer lost. It was right there in front of them. October 14th, 1986. It was supposed to be a fun day. Fourth grade students from Pine Bluff Elementary climbed onto bus 107 for their fall field trip. Their teacher, Mrs. Alder, had planned the outing for weeks. They were going to Cedar Creek Caverns, just 45 minutes away. The kids were excited, smiling, packed lunches in hand. There were 27 students, the bus driver, Mr. Tiller, and Mrs. Alder herself. The bus pulled out at 9 a.m., sharp. It never made it to the caverns, and it never came back. By 3 p.m., parents were calling the school. No answer. By 5 p.m., the police were called. By 8 p.m., every available officer in 2 counties was searching the roads. They checked highways, back roads, even bridges. They found nothing. No skid marks, no wreckage, no tire tracks. Just silence. It was like the bus had vanished off the face of the earth. For weeks, search parties combed the land. Planes flew overhead. Divers checked every known lake. Volunteers walked the forest with flashlights. The story made national news. School bus missing, 29 people gone. Some blamed a hidden road collapse. Others whispered about kidnappers, cults, or something darker. But no one had proof. And over time, people stopped asking. Pine Bluff Elementary closed 2 years later. The town shrank. And Bus 107 became a ghost story. Yeah, until now. Sheriff Darnell stared at the drone photo on Mason's phone. "This can't be real," he said. But it was. That roof, that number, that shape, it matched exactly. He called for backup. Within hours, officers, rescue crews, and reporters stood around the empty lake bed. A team of workers moved in with ropes and shovels. The sun was brutal. Dust blew across their boots. And then they reached the side of the bus. The bus was half buried, tilted at an angle. Its doors were shut. Windows broken from years underground. But what they found next stopped everyone cold. There were bones inside, dozens of them. Small ones, child-sized. They didn't speak for a long time. They just stood there staring into the silence that had lasted 38 years. The forensic team worked quickly. They counted 29 sets of remains, exactly the number from the missing report. School bags, lunch boxes, a chalkboard name list tucked in the front seat. Even Mrs. Alder's clipboard, still wrapped in plastic. But something was wrong. The inside of the bus wasn't smashed. There were no signs of panic. The seats were in place, neat, undisturbed. Almost like everyone had just sat there, waiting. One investigator, Dana Pierce, found something strange near the front. A locked wooden box behind the driver's seat. She pried it open carefully. Inside was a leather notebook. It belonged to Mr. Tiller, the driver. The last page was written in shaky handwriting. "We made a wrong turn. I don't trust the road signs. This place doesn't feel right. The trees here don't move like they should. One kid said the sky looked weird. I'll stay calm, but something is off." Sheriff Darnell closed the notebook. "They were scared," he said, "but there was no crash." He looked out at the dry lake. The land had swallowed them whole and kept them hidden for nearly 4 decades. But the mystery wasn't over. Because when investigators looked at old maps from 1986, something didn't match. The lake wasn't there, not in the records, not on the satellite photos. In fact, there had been no body of water marked in that spot until 1991. 5 years after the bus disappeared. So the question was, how did the bus get into a lake that didn't exist yet? And who had erased the original maps? Sheriff Darnell stared at the old maps for hours. One was from 1986, the other from 1991. In the 1986 map, the area where the bus was found was marked as dry forest. A few dirt roads, some hills, nothing unusual. But in the 1991 map, that exact same area was labeled as a lake, Lake Redfern. But here's the thing, Lake Redfern didn't exist in 1986. It wasn't listed in any town record, land deed, or environmental survey. There was no dam, no river feeding it, no reason for it to be there at all. Someone had created it after the bus disappeared, and now it was dry again. Just cracked mud and a rusted bus. Deputy Lane found something else. A surveyor's record from 1987 stored deep in the county archives. It listed a government-funded land reshaping project in that exact area. Emergency Containment Project Hazard Mitigation, but it didn't say what the hazard was. Only one line stood out, circled in red pencil. Do not discuss classified. Sheriff Darnell called a town meeting. He wanted to talk to anyone who remembered the bus, the field trip, the lake, anything. Most people were older now, some had forgotten, some never knew. But one man raised his hand, a soft-spoken farmer named Calvin Ridge. He stood slowly. "I saw the bus," he said. The room went silent. "You did?" Sheriff Darnell asked. Calvin nodded. "I was 17, skipped school that day, was out hunting with my dog. I saw bus 107 go down a dirt road that didn't belong there." "What do you mean?" "I mean the road wasn't on any map. It was wide, fresh, like it was just made. Had brand new gravel and fake signs, wooden ones, not metal." "Where did it lead?" Calvin's eyes looked haunted. "To the trees, but not normal trees. They were tall, too tall, all twisted. My dog wouldn't go near them. He howled and backed up." He paused. The bus turned in. I waited for it to come out. It never did. Everyone stared. "Why didn't you say anything?" someone asked. "I told my dad," Calvin said quietly. "He told me to stay quiet. Said some things were too big to mess with." "What things?" Darnell asked. Calvin looked down. "I think it was government." Back at the station, Deputy Lane dug deeper into the 1987 land project. He found a name tied to the paperwork. M. Harrows, a retired geologist. Wallace tracked him to a small trailer outside the next county. They paid him a visit. Harrows was in his 80s now, thin, tired, but sharp. "I remember the job," he said, sipping tea. "They told us to create a lake. Said there'd been a sinkhole problem. We were supposed to reshape the land, cover it with water, and move on. Did they say why? Sheriff Darnell asked. No, just that something needed to stay buried. Harrows paused. But I heard stories. Workers said there was a bus under there, full of kids. Darnell froze. Did you believe them? Harrows looked straight at him. I didn't want to. So the truth was clear now. Someone created a fake road, led the bus down it, then sealed the land, flooded it, and erased it from every map. But the question remained, why? Then one small clue shifted everything. Inside Mr. Tiller's notebook, the bus driver's, there was a second folded sheet of paper. It had no writing, just a hand-drawn symbol, a circle with jagged lines, like cracks or rays. At first it made no sense, but Deputy Lane recognized it. He'd seen that symbol on a gate out by the old Army test zone about 5 miles from the lake bed, an area that had been closed off for decades. He pulled the file. There it was again, circle with jagged rays. Next to it, the code, Operation Ember. Ember? Darnell asked. Lane nodded. Military project, 1980s. Radiation testing, canceled after 1 year. Radiation? Yep. They said nothing ever came of it, but they lied, Darnell finished. A request to the Department of Defense was made. 2 days later, a man in a black suit showed up at the sheriff's office. He had no name tag, no badge. He asked for the bus, asked for the notebook, asked for the boys who found it. Sheriff Darnell refused. You had 38 years to care, he said. Now it's ours. The man left a card with no name, just a phone number. He never returned. The final breakthrough came when investigators scanned the inside of the bus for trace materials. In the back row, the corner where the youngest kid sat, they found a strange powder. Faint, almost invisible. They tested it. The results came in 3 words. Uranium, contained, leaking. The field trip had been a mistake. Bus 107 must have taken a wrong turn and driven onto military land during a time when radioactive material had been stored or dumped. The government knew. They covered it up, not just to hide the accident, but to keep the public from knowing what had been buried there and what it had done to those children. There were no signs of struggle in the bus, only calm, like the kids never even knew something was wrong. Maybe they fell asleep. Maybe the driver slowed to a stop. Maybe it all happened in silence. And the government took care of the rest. Flooded the land. Changed the maps. Erased bus 107 until the drought gave it back. Within a week, the story was everywhere. CNN, Fox, local radio, national podcast. Missing school bus found after 38 years. Radioactive cover-up. Government won't answer. Where was bus 107 and why was it hidden? The world wanted answers, but no one had them. Not yet. The town of Pine Bluff came alive again, but not in a happy way. Families that had moved away returned, older now, tired. They stood at the lakebed in silence, hands shaking, tears falling. Some held photos of their children. Some just stared at the cracked mud. A few even stepped over the yellow tape and walked right up to the edge, ignoring police warnings. They had waited too long for this moment. Among them was Lila Adams. Her daughter Hannah was only 9 when she boarded bus 107 that morning in 1986. She was wearing pink socks, Lila said softly to the news crew. She wanted to bring her favorite book, but I said no. I told her to enjoy the trip, that I'd see her after school. She never did. Now, Lila stood facing the dried lake that had kept her daughter hidden for nearly 4 decades. And something inside her broke. Not just pain, but fire. "Someone needs to go to prison for this," she said. "Someone knew. Someone buried our babies." Behind the scenes, Sheriff Darnell worked around the clock. He fielded calls from senators, federal agents, news reporters. Most of the time, they didn't ask questions. They gave warnings. "Be careful what you say. There's more to this than you know." Let the past stay buried. He ignored them. Instead, he focused on the one thing left that might tell the truth. The bus. Forensics teams had taken apart every inch of bus 107. They had logged every item: backpacks, pencils, jackets, and lunchboxes. One metal lunchbox had something strange inside. Tucked between an apple and a crumbling PB, and J was a VHS tape. It was labeled with a sticker in childish handwriting. "Bus cam, by Brian. Sheriff Darnell called in a technician with old equipment to play it." The room went silent as the tape began. The footage was grainy, but the date in the corner read October 14th, 86. Inside the bus, kids laughed and waved at the camera. Brian, a smart, curious kid with spiky hair, had brought his dad's VHS camcorder on the trip. He sat in the back filming everything. "Say hi!" he yelled. A girl stuck out her tongue. The footage showed kids singing, trading snacks, and playing games. It looked normal until it didn't. At timestamp 9:27 a.m., the bus hit a sharp turn. The camera jolted. Brian laughed. "Whoa, that was new." Someone said, "Where are we?" The camera turned to the window. The trees outside didn't look normal. Tall, twisted, like they'd been burned and regrown in strange shapes. The sky was darker, too, not stormy, just wrong. Someone else said, "I feel dizzy." At 9:33 a.m., the kids got quiet. No more laughing. No more games. One girl asked, "Why are we stopping?" The camera showed the front of the bus. Mr. Tiller, the driver, had pulled over. He was out of his seat, looking at a sign on the side of the road. It read, "Authorized personnel only do not enter." The second sign was barely visible behind it. Operation Ember Site 3. The bus slowly turned down the road anyway. At 9:39 a.m., something flickered across the camera, like static. But not from the tape, from the bus itself. A faint humming sound came from outside. Brian turned the camera to the kids. They looked sleepy, faces pale. One had a nosebleed. The teacher, Mrs. Alder, stood in the aisle, holding onto a rail. She looked scared. The bus kept driving. Then, at 9:42 a.m., the humming stopped. The screen flickered again. The bus had come to a full stop. The camera turned to the windows. Just trees. Endless, still, lifeless trees. Then Brian whispered, "Where are we?" The tape ended with static. Sheriff Darnell sat back in his chair. "This tape, this proves it wasn't just an accident," he said. "They were led there. And something had been waiting." Experts from the EPA and Department of Energy arrived 2 days later. They wore hazmat suits and masks. They took samples of the ground, the air, and the rust on the bus frame. One of them, quietly, told Darnell off record, "This was a spill site. Operation Ember used this land to bury nuclear material. When the field trip rolled through, they panicked. They had to contain the exposure. No one could know, so they erased it." "But those were children," Darnell said. The agent didn't respond. The families were furious. Petitions were started. Protests formed. But the government never confirmed or denied what happened. No one was arrested. No one claimed the land. And after a few weeks, the headlines moved on. But Pine Bluff didn't forget. Neither did the parents. Or the kids who watched that old tape and saw classmates they never met. On the 39th anniversary of the disappearance, the town held a memorial. The names of all 29 people were carved into a stone monument near the edge of the dry lake. They were never lost. We were just kept from finding them. Underneath, someone had placed Brian's lunchbox. Still dented, still rusted, but now open. The tape inside had been copied and sent to every family. It ended with a frame of Brian's smiling face, giving a thumbs up to the camera, frozen in time. 1 month after the discovery, the lake bed filled again. Heavy fall rains soaked the cracked earth, and by mid-November, water had returned to the bowl where Bus 107 had been hidden for nearly 40 years. But this time, the land didn't feel the same. Or now the people knew what had been buried there and who had been forgotten. Sheriff Darnell stood near the shoreline with a fishing rod in hand, not to fish, he never fished, but because it gave him an excuse to watch the water and think. He still had questions about the road that didn't exist, about the radiation, about the humming sound on the tape. He had asked every expert, pushed every door, called every number. Most didn't answer. The ones who did simply said, "It's classified." The town of Pine Bluff slowly returned to its quiet rhythm. Kids played, the diner reopened, the post office painted its doors. But something had shifted. At the edge of town, new signs had been posted around the lake. No trespassing federal land. Barbed wire was added, cameras installed, and 2 silent black trucks were seen leaving the site late one night. Sheriff Darnell watched all of it, but no one ever knocked on his door. They didn't need to. He already knew. Then, just before Christmas, a package arrived at the sheriff's office. No return address. No name. Just a manila envelope sealed tight. Inside was a single Polaroid photo. The picture showed a sign, stuck in the ground, weathered and sun-bleached. It read, Ember Site 3, closure confirmed, October 1986. In the corner, a handwritten note. They weren't supposed to be there. He called Deputy Lane into the office. They closed the site a week before the field trip, Lane said after reading it, but the signs were still up. Darnell nodded, and the road was still open. So whoever gave the driver directions, they sent him right into it. On purpose? That part still had no answer. Weeks passed. Then spring came, and with it something unexpected. Mrs. Lila Adams, the mother of Hannah, the girl with the pink socks, was cleaning her attic. She had avoided it for years. Too many memories, too many boxes. But now, with answers finally in the open, she felt ready. Near the bottom of a storage bin marked Hannah 4th grade, she found something strange. It was a postcard. Old, yellowed, never sent. The front showed a picture of a mountain. On the back, in Hannah's handwriting, was this. If I go somewhere far, I will send you a postcard from the sky. I'll say I'm okay, even if I'm not. Lila sat on the floor for a long time, holding the card, crying, smiling, both at once. Back at the lake, a group of kids placed flowers at the monument. Their teacher, Mrs. Navarro, read the names aloud, one by one. None of the kids had ever met the 1986 class, but now they knew their names. They knew their story, and that meant something. And then, on the 40th anniversary, something happened that no one could explain. The lake dried again, but this time only a small circle near the center cracked open. Inside, workers found something strange sticking out of the dirt. It wasn't metal. It was wood. They dug, and what they pulled out was a time capsule. An actual sealed wooden box, about the size of a shoebox. Inside were objects. A pencil, a toy dinosaur, a class photo, and one final message. To whoever finds this, we were here. We were real. Don't forget us. Signed, Class of 1986, Bus 107. The town held one last service that evening. Candles lined the lake. Each child's name was whispered in the dark, and this time the silence felt different. Not empty, but full of memory, of truth, of peace. That night, Sheriff Darnell sat on his porch, his dog at his feet, coffee in his hands, and a letter in his lap. He'd written it but never sent it. To the families, to the government, to anyone who cared. But the words weren't angry. They were simple. They never ran away. They never got lost. They were led into silence. And we refused to let it stay that way. Down by the lake, the water shimmered under the moonlight. And if you looked close, really close, you might almost believe you saw something under the surface and hid a yellow curve, a faded number, 107, and the shadows of children waving from a window, still waiting to be seen, still riding home.